So it's November 15th, in case you're wondering, and I wasn't sure what to call this presentation. I just slapped religious identity onto it, and I think you'll see it relates to that general topic. So welcome everyone, and if you're joining us on YouTube, we have to remember that nowadays we're putting all of on YouTube weekly, and that people from all over the world can log in and find out what atheist church is about instead of us having to answer the question of what do you do in an atheist church. We can show them. Just go and watch it. So first things first, from our point of view, there can be an atheist church easily because religion is not God, and religion is not even about the supernatural. Instead, we say religion is about religious questions, and at various times we've talked about a whole variety of religious questions. We made a short list, and pretty much always we're talking about religious questions. And what makes a question religious is that it's a question of deep and profound importance to the human condition, and it is not a question about the objective world that science can address. As Lee was saying, if it's not something you can just about the world outside, then you're looking at probably a religious, quote unquote, religious question. So one of our big religious questions that we were talking about before the start of the service here amongst ourselves, why do people believe or disbelieve things? How do they get that way? That's something that we're endlessly fascinated by. We might realize that what we're really asking is why do people believe or disbelieve differently than we do, because we all understand how we have come to what we believe or disbelieve, and I think most of us disbelieve most of everything, and I've preached for and said we really should strive not to really believe much of anything. I mean, it's enough to know that you read something, you saw something, you experienced something, or someone else said something or wrote something. That's sufficient. You don't have to draw too many conclusions as we go through life, other than the operational conclusions that have to do with what you're going to do, whether you're going to open a door before you try to go through the doorway and things like that. This question boils down to another general, more general question is, what is the matter with people that they are the way they are, that they're so different than I am? And of course, we know religion has been a big problem over the centuries. People have fought wars over this question. They think something's the matter with the other people. They're infidels, they're heathen, they're heretics. People are very big on expressing themselves as to why they got to where they're at. This question is not exactly a secret. Here's some books, people trying to explain why they're one thing. And of course, why you're one thing is also partly a matter of why you're not something else. I have to confess, I've not read all these books, but I do want to get them and read some of them. I've read excerpts from Ibn Waraq's Why I'm Not a Muslim. Of course, I think most of us have read portions, if not the whole thing, of Why I Am Not a Christian, Bertrand Russell's famous work. I really do want to read Evan Thompson, Why He's Not a Buddhist. What's Wrong with Buddhism? Except that they're into reincarnation, some Buddhists at least. And then people have actually written books, why you're not a not believer, and claiming that you need faith to be an atheist. Merlin and I have talked about that book on the right there. There's actually a church bulletin that addresses that crazy thing. And here's some people that are confused why somebody is a Muslim and a Christian and a Jew, and here's a woman, look at that, Nogan, she's a Muslim and a feminist. Can you imagine? So when Christians say, well, Jesus had to be God because otherwise he would be a scrambled egg, because the only other alternative is he was absurd. And I said, well, people are absurd all the time, aren't they? I've not read this book either. I do want to get a hold of it, Why I Am an Atheist. But I would say, I think the answer to this question could be answered many different ways. There's someone that I found there on the internet, an atheist because it's cool. I think we all know it's not cool to be an atheist. It's not an atheist. He's not an atheist because of religious extremism or oppression, or because he doesn't think that evil can exist in a world with a God, although I think really you cannot be a believer in an all good, all powerful God in a world where evil exists. But as he was saying, you can define God all kinds of different ways. We, of course, would love to encounter one single theist who would say, well, if you do X, Y, Z, then BC will happen because God exists. And of course, there is such test. It's not falsifiable. They can always change their definition of God, and you don't have enough faith, or you got healed from something, but then you had a relapse. It's because you didn't have enough faith, blah, blah. And as Lee said too, science is not going to disprove God. But the burden of proof does lie on people who claim that gods exist. And if they're not going to make claims that are falsifiable, then they're not really making claims of the external world. But of course, that leaves the internal world. Why is someone and whatever they are, some sort of ist? Generally, they were raised that way. I think that clearly, in some parts of the world, being a Muslim is common, and in other parts of the world, it's not. It's like biogeography. Kangaroos live in Australia. They don't live in Greenland. Penguins live in Antarctica. They don't live in Morocco. Another reason someone is what they are is they were persuaded to it, or they were persuaded out of something else and just happened to land on what they're at. They might have become emotionally attached to it, and that can happen a lot of different ways. Maybe you marry someone who is of a different faith, and you don't feel that strongly about the one that you were raised in. Or maybe some relative in your family you were very emotionally close with, and so you adopt their point of view. In fact, I think one of the Supreme Court justices, I think it was Neil Gorsuch, I looked this up recently, started out as a Catholic because I saw somebody on the internet claim that, oh, Catholics are excluded and discriminated against. And I thought, oh, gee, there's a whole bunch of Catholics on the Supreme Court. How can that? But I guess Neil Gorsuch was raised Catholic, and then he married an Episcopalian, so now he's part of the Episcopal Church. And of course, people can be traumatized by something. I suppose I was an altar boy as a boy, but I was never molested by a priest. And had I been, I suppose, then someone would say that I was an atheist because of that. I think that many atheists point to the fact that they read the Bible or other holy books. And more often, people studied and thought about it. I think that Lee had this at one time, that he read Richard Dawkins and a lot of other authors. Carl Sagan is another one that many people read and come to realize that you don't need all the supernaturalism stuff. The world works perfectly fine without. So why specifically is someone an atheist? Of course, I think the two big things, they were raised that way, or they were raised in religious supernaturalism, but they found out that there's all these different religions. And of course, if you're raised in one religion and told one thing, then you find out that, oh, gee, other people say other things and do things different ways. It creates real doubt. And then you start wondering, well, they can't all be right. How do I know one I was raised to believe is right? And that starts a journey of exploration. You have to care about it, though, for it to matter. If it doesn't really matter to you, just know that, well, I'm part of my tribe and this is what we believe, and there are other tribes. Okay, so what? The fact that there are other tribes doesn't change what my tribe is. And that's the subject I want to deal with at some point coming up, is the trouble with tribalism, and where does that tribalism come from? Why are we burdened with that? But lots of different religious tribes, and if you have an open mind, you start wondering, what is the deal? Another thing is other imaginary beings. I was taught that Santa Claus was out there. He lived at the North Pole, made toys all year, and at Christmas time they came and brought me what I wanted. Of course, when I had a tooth fall out, the tooth fairy was there. Did any of you know that Dwayne Johnson starred in a movie about the tooth fairy? If you Google tooth fairy and look for images, they're all cartoon images except this movie about the tooth fairy, and I guess I'm going to have to put that on my list of things. I don't think there was ever any live action on the Easter Bunny there on the lower left, that other than somebody wearing a costume. And Jack Frost, my goodness, I think we all know that person. And really, of course, Jack Frost is proven all the time in the wintertime, and especially where I grew up in Wisconsin, you can look at the window and there's this intricate pattern of frost in the morning that formed overnight. Well, who did that? Somebody had to do it. So it's Jack Frost. Jack Frost proved all the time. But of course, I think most of us that experienced the fact that that all of these beings were fake, all of these things were just pretend. And there's a lot of atheists, of course, who say, oh, we shouldn't tell our children that Santa Claus is out there. It's kind of hard to because the whole culture is full of it, especially at this time of year and in the next month or so. But when you find out it's all pretend, well, there's two things. Number one, a lot of children do become upset and they think, oh, I was lied to. And many atheists shouldn't tell their kids about these beings because it's lying to them. But kids have a very active imagination, and they're going to think of these things anyways. And they love fairy stories. And if they watch Star Wars, they're going to think that's real too. And eventually you do discover the difference between fact and fiction. And there's really nothing wrong with fiction either, but you just have to keep it straight from the facts. Another reason that there are atheists is because they read the Holy Bible, the Torah, the Quran, and they notice the similarities and how like they are to fairy tales. Edith Hamlin's Bullfinch mythology, Hans Christian Andersen, and so forth. How can you not make the connection? It's like going to the zoo and seeing the monkeys and know those monkeys are somehow more related to us than the zebras are, and certainly more related to us than anything in the reptile house. How can you not make the connection? And then you read some of our own holy scripture, which is to say all books, all the output of human imagination and spirit and science and all the rest of it. It all puts it in perspective. It gives a context, and that's why so many of us became atheists. I tried to figure out where to put the not in here. Why is someone not an atheist? But of course, we are atheists, so why not is someone not? Why? Okay, I should have put the not at the beginning. Not so why is someone an atheist? Not because we hate God, not because they had a bad relationship with authority or a father, not because we reject authority and want to be our own God and want to sin, but these things are inside of us. Not so. I'd be interested in your take on this in the discussion afterwards. Maybe I missed a reason why we're not reason why we're atheists. And that's why the study of a religion, any religion, if you want to call atheism as a religion, it's not, but our religious beliefs, how we answer religious questions, that is our religion. Study of a religion is the study of persons, because every single one is unique. And I was thinking about this and realizing that the important thing about science is the thing that's common. Even though everybody looks at a quadratic equation or the gravity equation or reads a book about string theory or whatever, everybody has a different take on that, but it's the commonality that matters. But when it comes to religion, it's the particularities that matter. There are no two Muslims, not even any two Christians who are alike. Everyone is a sect of one because the understanding is in their personal subjective experience and not in an equation as with science. People cannot get together and solve religious problems by putting their heads together. At some point they're going to have to vote, and they're going to have to read, even what they vote on, they're going to read into different things. They're going to read different things into the same catechism or the same creed. And that's certainly shown in Christianity. The Nicene Creed did not stop all the sects and the heresies and people diverting and diverging into different ideas about the religion. Let's keep in mind that religion is one's total reaction upon life. That's from William James' book, The Varieties of Religious Experience. It's a compilation of a series of lectures that he gave in Scotland back in the 19th century. If you've never read it, it's good reading. Not as good maybe as some other things, but it's good. So if any of you have ideas about other things to talk about, send them along to me. If you're seeing this on YouTube afterwards, there's the email address. You can let us know, or put your comments down below on the YouTube. November 5th, a few things happened here on this day in history. 1777, that was when the Continental Congress approved the Articles of Confederation. That was the first constitution that the United States lived under. And in fact, I forget the name of the very first US president, but it was not George Washington, not under the Articles of Confederation. On this day in 1939, FDR laid the cornerstone of the Jefferson Memorial. In 1966, Gemini 12 splashed down in the Atlantic. That was the last mission of the Gemini program. I just think only 3 years later, Apollo astronauts walking on the moon. It's just amazing the pace of technological progress. And in 1971, how many years after that is that? 5 years. Intel released the 4004 microprocessor. For those of you who are not sure what that is, that was the first single chip microprocessor. Before that, it had always been a hodgepodge, a Frankenstein monster to have a computer. So to review briefly our principles, of course, reason. And what do you apply reason to facts? And how do we even get reason from generalizing from facts? So facts and reason have this wonderful relationship, and that is what we love to rely on. And we want to enjoy what we get from that, and from life and each other, and appreciate what we have, not always looking for something on the other side of the rainbow, on the other side of death. Appreciate what we have right here and now, and find the value, meaning, purpose, which is to say, to love that which we have. Quiz, if we talk about politics, try to be dispassionate and academic. If you find yourself getting worked up, fight it back. Stick to public policy and laws. And of course, public policies and laws make life miserable for a lot of people. They're instruments of exploitation and all of that sort of thing, but that's what we really need to focus on. And realize that facts are in dispute. There's a lot of different spin that goes on these days. People will point to the same thing and they see it very differently. So if you realize that's what's going on, realize that, well, sometimes you just have to leave things be, because there's no point in discussing things unless there's going to be some productive result. There are so many matters of taste. We can both eat the same thing and have a very different reaction to it. Don't ask me to eat some Brussels sprouts, please. They are the vegetables from hell. And of course, we always respect each other, although not necessarily each other's ideas, but we all want the same thing, don't we? Let's acknowledge and pay homage to that. As Jonathan Haidt said in his book, The Righteous Mind, that definitely should be on your shelf. Better yet, in your hand, reading it. If you really want to change someone's mind, you need to see things from their angle, because empathy is an antidote to righteousness. And what he means by righteousness is that kind of attitude. We've all seen it, and we probably all have a little bit of it ourselves. We need to be vigilant. This idea that I'm right and you're wrong, and so you're damned to hell because you don't see things the way I do. Remember, too, the Freethought is not free. Please visit our webpage. Oh, if not been to our webpage, you really need to go there. There are tons of things there. We do add things all the time. www.churchoffreethought.org. We depend on your continued support. The more support we get, the more we can do together. Because we can do together what we cannot do on our own. And as I said, you're not going to be damned to hell, but you might be darned to heck if you don't give us money. So give us money, otherwise you're darned to heck, and no, God will not reward you. Most of all, we want to help promote your views. They're your values. And demonstrating our commitment and being the future that we wish to see. That's probably one of the greatest wonderful acts of grace, so to speak, of not grace, that we can do. Be the future that we wish to see. And with that, we can move on to discussion. But just again, for the YouTube viewers, please click bell so you get notices. We do new uploads. Make a comment, like us, or Facebook page, and like us there. Participate and be part of what we're trying to do. Don't let it suck up your whole life unless you want it to. But you need to add us to your priorities if it is a priority to you that people have these more enlightened way of looking at things. So
Hey,
with
Tim,
that, we will
before you
move to
stop
discussion.
sharing, if